Welcome to Dr. Dastardly's Scary Stories. Now, we're starting to get in a little bit more of a rhythm with our stories on YouTube, and the aim is to be a lot more consistent so we can deliver the great stories to you guys. If you haven't watched my stuff in the past, then I've got something for you, but if you have, I really thank you guys for being part of the journey. Now, like I said, if you haven't, I've got something great for you. We run our 2 stories to 3 stories a daily on TikTok. On Instagram, there's some bits and pieces of different stuff. And to make things different, we've also got a weekly hidden story, which you can only find on our website, drdastardly.com. Now, you just pop in your email and I'll send out a weekly hidden story to you. Now, it's not posted anywhere else on the internet, only through the website. So make sure you check that out. And as we ramp up, they're going to get a little bit more gruesome and a little bit more detailed. But we kind of wound things back a little bit, I should say, on TikTok, because a lot of our videos just kept getting pulled down all the time. So just make sure you make our email a safe user, and don't forget that those videos are coming to you weekly. So check your email and your inbox. Now let's get to it. So this is one of the best stories that I think I've ever done. It's really creepy, and it's one of these things you've just got to listen to because it's pretty nuts. You won't believe the end. So her whole life, for 35 years, Bree Thompson knew something was not right with her. She would wake every single night with stabbing pains all over her body. Doctor after doctor, test after test showed nothing. The stabbing pains were the same in exactly the same place all over her body every night. Until one of her friends said to her, "Hey, look, why don't you go see this spiritual healer?" And everything changed for Bree. She'd lay in the room, close her eyes, and the woman would talk her through discovering her past life. Now, this is some pretty crazy stuff. It was almost like a trance state. But what she discovered was terrifying. You see, she saw this young woman, 17, 18-year-old, running barefoot through the woods. There was this man chasing her. He was carrying this large carving knife. As she watched it play out, almost like a video, she just about jumped out of her chest. It was like, dead set like watching a movie in real life. The light had fallen on the forest and the woods were getting dark. The young woman was running and she tripped and fell on this log, all of a sudden hitting her head on the ground. But it allowed the man that was chasing her to catch up, and he jumped on top of her and plunged the large hunting knife straight into her chest. Bang! The woman was screaming. He was in a manic rage, just continuing to stab her over and over and over. Her piercing screams echoed through the woods. But after about a minute of her fighting and screaming, she finally fell limp. But the man continued to stab her, just stabbed her limp body 22 times to be exact. Bree was panicked. She woke up in this sweat, thankful it was a dream. She was in the room with other people. The woman holding the glass ran over and she was all panicked. She's like, "Bree, what are you doing? Are you okay?" She was so concerned because of Bree's, state that she is in. She said, "Your past is dark. I don't suggest you go back again." Her head was spinning and she left that day. For the next few days, though, all Bree could think about was that session and that woman running through the woods. She wanted to go back and experience it again, so she begged the woman if she could come back and do the past life experience again, which the woman finally agreed. They decided, though, to do them one-on-one because the last time was so intense and it scared the other people in the room. Everyone was freaked out. So it was only a few days later Bree returned to the woman's house and they continued these past life sessions. This time, though, much faster, she returned to the woods and she relived it all over again. It was the woods, the man, and him killing the woman. She held on, though, through this time, and she could feel herself hovering over the top. She felt like she was a little bit more in control. But this time she could see her face. The guy was maybe 50 years old, quite fit, brown hair, but he was covered in the woman's blood. While hovering over, she watched the man then cut a chunk of the woman's hair off with the knife. He grabbed it and he put it in his jacket pocket. He then grabbed the woman's dead body and he dragged her about 100 meters back through the bush and threw into this shallow grave. He then filled it in with a shovel. Bree woke up again suddenly. This playing out was just too much for her. Her eyes were full of tears and she was panically breathing. The woman doing the session begged her, please Bree, stop this. It's too stressful for you. But Bree just needed to know more. Who was this guy? Like, why was he killing this woman? And was this even real or was she just dreaming it? Another few days passed and Bree decided again she couldn't stop. She called the woman and said, please, can I continue? Session after session continued to explore this experience, living it over and over again, getting further and further into it, deeper and deeper. But the last time she did it was different. You see, she could see the man. You see, she could see the killer. He was in his house this time. He lifted up this floorboard in this room. She watched him as he pulled the chunk of hair out of his jacket, lifted up the secret compartment in the floorboards, and stored the hair in there. Bree could see that this hidden storage area is just full of different coloured hair. There was all these different ones in there. It just wasn't one. The man then walks out of the bedroom, down the hallway into the window. He pulls back the curtain. He looks into the street. Suddenly, Bree wakes up again in a panic. She's freaked out. She looks at the woman that was holding the session and straight in the eyes, she says to her, I know the intersection that the killer was just looking through at the window. Bree gets up. She runs out of the session and straight into her car. Straight away, she calls her husband and tells him of the experience that she's just had. She just says, babe, I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to go for a drive. I'm going to be away for a little bit. She said, my dad used to work in a factory just up the road from where this guy just looked out the window. And me and my mum used to sit there and wait at the park for my dad every day. The same park that I just saw this guy look out the window at. She goes, it's where I grew up. The area was about a 2-hour drive from where she was. The whole drive, Bree was like sweating, thinking about what she'd seen in the session the whole time, just panicked about what was going to come. She finally arrived and noticed the park. It hadn't changed too much. It was older and overgrown and unkept. But Bree stood in the middle of the park, looking back towards the house that she thought the man was in, and suddenly seen the blinds pull open. And then they closed. She walked across the intersection and she approached the front door. Standing in total fear, she knocked. The door opened and in front of her stood this old man. He was maybe, 80, 90 years old. He asked her, may I help you? And without hesitation, she said, I know this sounds crazy, but I saw your house in this dream I just had, and I recognized it from when I was a kid. See, my father, he just worked just up the road, and I used to play at that park right across the road there every day, waiting for him to finish work. The old man just smiled and said, so how can I help you? She laughed and said, well, I'm wondering if I could speak to your son. Is he home? The man looked at her and softly said, I don't have a son. Puzzled, she said, oh, well, in my dream, there was this man who was killing women and he kept their hair in this hidden spot under the floor, and I'm pretty sure it was this house. The man just smiled and said, by Joe, that sounds really interesting. I don't get many visitors anymore. Why don't you come in and tell me more about it? I'd love to hear it. So Bree goes inside, but once inside, everything felt so familiar. She took a seat on the old couch and the man continued to stand. He said, let me go fix us a cup of tea each. Bree said, sure. But while sitting there, she started to have flashbacks of the room. She got up and she walked over to the window where she'd seen this guy look out, and she pulled back the curtains, and it was exactly the same in her session. She was looking onto the park, the exact same park. It was just overgrown and a bit older. Bree could hear the man tinkering around in the kitchen. He was old and slow, and she thought, well, this guy's going to take forever, so I might just have a little peek around the house. She slowly walks down the hallway while noticing the bedroom on the right-hand side. that she'd seen in her session. She quietly walks into the room and straight to the corner where she thought this trapdoor, this secret compartment was. She saw this leather strap sticking out, so she pulls up the leather strap and almost screams as she falls backwards. Inside is just mounds of chunks of hair. There's black, brown, red, you name it, blonde. It was full of them. There was maybe, 30, 40 chunks of hair in this hidden compartment. She quickly pulls out her mobile phone to call the police, but hears a noise and looks over and she sees the man standing in the doorway just smiling. And he says, "I don't know who you are or how you know about my girls, but I guarantee you this, you're going to get to know them a lot more." The woman was freaked out. She decided to get up and run straight for him. As she ran at him and lunged at him, he pulled out this big knife and she ran straight into it, straight through her stomach. But she hit him and they landed on the wall, dropped to the ground. The man was strong, much stronger than she thought for his age. She managed to control his arm and she was holding his arm that had the knife. But she could feel pain now in her stomach. She had blood pouring everywhere, all over him because she was on top of him. If she hadn't have known that she was stabbed, she would have thought that this guy was dying and bleeding everywhere because he was covered. The old man took his free hand and he grabbed her face. He didn't know what to do. He was trying to grab her throat, but he was pushing on her mouth. In desperation, Bree grabbed his fingers with her mouth and bit down as hard as she could. His fingers were caught in her mouth and she was ripping at them. She could feel the bones in two of the fingers that were in her mouth crack as she bit down, and she actually severed one of the fingers completely off. Lucky for Bree, though, that was just enough that this old guy to release the knife. She grabbed the knife and she ran out the door. As soon as she got out the door, she screamed for help, but because of the wound in her stomach, she collapsed on the road. There was two workers across the road who quickly ran over to help her. She was collapsed on the gutter at this stage. She screamed, "This guy stabbed me. Please call the police. Please call the police." As one man crouched next to her holding pressure on the wound, he used his phone to call police. The other worker ran into the old man's house and slowly walked through the front door that was still open. As they gave the address to the dispatcher, the phone on the phone of the dispatcher, a gunshot rang off through the house. There was dead silence. Both Bree and the worker that was on the phone to the police looked up as the old man emerged from the house, holding a rifle. He pointed the rifle straight at the guy that was on the phone and just shot him, straight in the head, blowing his head straight off, right as he sat next to Bree. The phone hit the ground and Bree could hear the dispatcher on the phone calling out, "Are you okay? Are you okay? What's happening? We have a car on its way. Hold on." And Bree was just frozen. As she looked up, the old man walked towards her, standing in front of her, and he pointed the rifle straight at her head, pressing it right up against her temple. With blood pouring from his severed fingers, he lifted the rifle up and he said, "You actually remind me of one of the bitches that I once knew. I stabbed her 22 times. He pulled the trigger and blew her head off. Her body collapsed to the ground. There were police across the street. There were people across the street, but no one went close to them when the police arrived. He was finally arrested for rape and murder of 28 women over the last 50 years. He later died in prison. He had a heart attack before he was actually sentenced. But he's recorded saying to detectives that Miss 22 was his favourite. And he even told the police that he was looking forward to dying because once he died, he knew he was going to come back and he was going to hunt down that bitch and kill her again. That's the end of the story, guys. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, make sure you subscribe to my channel, hit the bell, and get your notifications from my new stories coming out. And don't forget to go to my website, drdastardly.com, and you subscribe to my hidden story. Just put in your email and it'll be sent to you weekly. But there's some pretty cool ones in there as well. So I hope you guys enjoy this story and stay tuned.